The moment her hand reached for my chest, I still believed she might hug me. But instead, my daughter Claire tore the necklace from my neck with such force that the clasp snapped and the beads scattered across the ballroom floor. The music stopped. 150 guests froze their forks and champagne flutes suspended in midair. The sound of pearls clattering on marble echoed louder than the string quartet had only seconds before. She stood before me in her wedding gown, eyes sharp as glass, and shouted so everyone could hear, "Give me the deed, mother. The $6 million family hotel belongs to us now. Sign it over." Gasps rippled through the room. A woman in lavender pressed her hand to her mouth. The groom Daniel shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. And my only child, my daughter whom I had carried through winters of hunger and summers of sacrifice, looked at me as if I were nothing more than a locked vault. "My name is Nora Whitman. I am 74 years old. I have run the Whitman Seaside Hotel for almost 5 decades. It was not just my husband Robert's legacy. It was the beating heart of our family. Every summer, Claire played hide-and-seek between the linen carts and fell asleep in the lobby to the sound of the ocean. And now, on the most important day of her life, she chose to humiliate me in front of 150 witnesses because I refused to hand her the keys to everything. The ballroom lights felt cruel, bleaching my shame white. My cheek stung from the sudden jerk of the chain. Yet it wasn't the physical pain that hollowed me out. It was the silence that followed. Not a soul stepped forward. Not a friend. Not a cousin. Even Daniel looked away, adjusting his cufflink as if this scene had nothing to do with him. I bent down slowly, gathering the beads of my necklace one by one. My hands shook, but I forced myself steady. I would not weep. I would not break. When I rose, I met Claire's triumphant eyes with a calmness that made her falter for half a second. Then I turned and began to walk toward the doors. Behind me, whispers darted like knives. "Did you hear what she said, $6 million? She ripped it off her own mother. Maybe the old woman really doesn't need it anymore." I kept walking head high, each step measured as though the marble floor itself belonged to me and not to her. When I reached the foyer, I slipped my hand into my small black purse, the same purse I had carried for nearly 10 years, and found my phone. My fingers knew the number by heart. I pressed it, and when the line connected, I whispered, "Michael, it's Nora. I need you at the hotel. Tonight. Bring the papers we prepared. It's time." Michael was my lawyer, the only one besides me who knew the truth that I had been financing Claire and Daniel's debts for years, that without me, they would have drowned long ago. He paused only a moment before answering Mrs. Whitman. "Once we do this, there is no going back. There's nothing left to go back to," I told him. "Come." 30 minutes. I ended the call. Through the heavy doors, I could still hear the muffled music starting again as if nothing had happened. But I knew, I knew that the world inside that ballroom was already shifting. Because when those doors opened again, and Michael walked in with my documents, Claire would no longer be the bride basking in glory. She would be the daughter who had underestimated her mother, and she would collapse in tears. I slipped the broken chain into my purse beads, rattling softly like a warning bell. I drew in one long breath and stepped into the night air. The cool breeze from the ocean stung my face, but it carried with it a strange relief. The tide was turning. Before we continue, let me pause for just one moment. If you find stories like mine about family dignity and the courage to reclaim your life worth listening to, I would be grateful if you liked this video, subscribed to the channel, and turned on the notification bell. That way, you won't miss the next chapter of my journey. Now, let me tell you how it all began. My name is Nora Whitman. I am 74, a widow, and the keeper of a weathered seaside hotel that once belonged to my husband Robert. What happened in the ballroom has roots in years of quiet choices. A woman builds a roof and hopes her family stays. I have slept more nights in the manager's room behind the laundry than in any suite. I know the rattle of the service elevator. I know which hallway gathers fog at dawn. Robert and I bought the hotel when the paint peeled and the pipes complained. He learned the boilers. I learned the books. We bargained for fish at the pier. We hemmed curtains. We shook hands with contractors who still wore salt on their sleeves. On reopening day, we stood on the steps with a borrowed ribbon and dull scissors. Robert leaned to my ear and said, "Real money is quiet. Noise only invites trouble." He smiled as if fear were just another bill we could pay. The necklace Claire tore from my neck was Robert's wedding gift, a silver chain with a small pearl. Not flashy, not expensive. The kind of thing that lies cool against the throat and feels like a promise. He fastened it our first night and told me to keep it for every storm. I kept it through births and funerals, through lean winters, and the small miracles you see only when you tuck in the last guest and sweep the lobby yourself. People assume a hotel is rooms. It is really rhythms. Breakfast trays, laundry steam, the soft thud of luggage on carpet, the evening murmur in the bar when a pianist finds a key everyone can bear. I guarded those rhythms while Robert worked with wrenches below. When Claire was born, I wrapped her in warm towels in the linen room. The housekeeper cried. The bellman brought daisies in a plastic pitcher. She learned to walk between carts of sheets. She turned the mail slot into a castle. Staff slipped her muffins and called her our little mascot. We indulged her, yes. After 12-hour shifts, Robert still carried her on his shoulders down the boardwalk. When I balanced the accounts at midnight, I left a chocolate kiss on her pillow. When she wanted ballet, we found room in the ledger for shoes and lessons. Our profits were never glamorous. We used them like a faithful kitchen. Enough soup for everyone. Always one more bowl. By her teenage years, the hotel stopped being a maze and started being a stage. Guests told her she had movie star eyes. She learned the art of tips without asking. She became fluent in charm. Robert called it Whitman Sparkle. I called it rain that could turn to ice if you did not step carefully. Still, I believed a girl raised among sheets and schedules would understand work. I believed the muscle memory of mopping would stay in her bones. Then the ocean took Robert one winter. A coronary, they said, an ambulance that moved quickly but not quickly enough. I signed papers I did not want to read. I slipped his ring into my pocket. Before dawn, I unlocked the front doors because someone had to. I learned how to haggle for oil and calm a guest with a flooded sink. I kept our life small on purpose. Old Buick. Shoes that could survive wet floors. No loans we could not pay. The necklace stayed at my throat like a lighthouse. I touched it when the numbers looked mean. Claire grew into a woman with plans wider than our sidewalk. She liked the sound of brand and expansion. She liked the way acquaintances leaned in when she said 6 million. She forgot that numbers are not stories. She forgot the smell of lemon oil on the banister. She looked at the hotel and saw a vault. I look at it and see the years we traded for keys. If she calls it a gold mine, I will not argue, but I hold the shovel, the map, and the blistered hands that found it. What I wanted for her was simpler, a life sturdy as our stair rails work, and the humility to care for others. 2 years before the wedding, Claire brought Daniel to the hotel on a windy Saturday. The ocean tossed whitecaps against the seawall, and the lobby smelled faintly of lemon oil and coffee. I had polished the brass bell and set out oatmeal cookies the way I always did. Daniel stepped in as a man steps into a showroom he intends to price. His eyes moved from the scuffed oak desk to the faded Persian rug, to the chandelier that hummed when the heat kicked on. He smiled without warmth and said the word charming as if it were a polite diagnosis. Claire tucked her arm through his and toured him like a broker. The oak staircase, the framed photographs of Robert holding a ribbon that never quite cut, the lounge with mismatched armchairs that regulars claimed by memory. Daniel tapped the banister with his knuckle. He pressed a finger into the cushion of an armchair. He held a throw pillow at arm's length as though it might confess to being out of date. At the desk, he glanced at the ledger I still keep on paper. He asked if I had moved the books to the cloud. He said investors like to see dashboards. Claire laughed. She said Mom loves her paper. I will modernize her one day. She said it with sugar, then watched me for the sting. I felt for my necklace with 2 fingers and found the cool of the pearl. Habit, not armor. We poured coffee. Daniel stirred without tasting. He asked about occupancy rates and seasonal variance. His voice carried that clean, efficient tone of a man who solves problems by renaming them. I answered as I always do. Steady, factual, no apology for the winter months when we run on locals and conference stragglers. He nodded already elsewhere, as if the numbers were auditioning for his attention. When the tour reached the 3rd floor, he paused at the fire stairs. He looked at Claire, and then at me. It must be hard for you to climb these, Nora. Claire touched my sleeve. Her voice softened in that careful way people use when they are about to move your furniture. Mom, you should think about living smaller, safer. A ground floor apartment near the clinic. No more late nights at the front desk. She smiled like a promise and added, we worry about you alone in this big place. The words settled like dust, light at first, then persistent. I told them the truth. I am not alone. I live among my work and my people. Still, Claire pressed. An article from a lifestyle site, a pamphlet on senior communities, a card for a realtor who specializes in downsizing. Daniel took a photograph of the stair landing. He said he loves documenting details. I noticed he avoided the camera when we passed the peeling corner of wallpaper near room 304. He preferred angles that made the hotel look tired enough to need rescue. That evening, my sister Anna arrived with a jar of chowder. She is a nurse who has seen too many daughters speak softly while they push. She listened while I recounted the tour, the cloud talk, the safer lines. She has gentle hands and a blunt mouth. Claire forgets who carried her through the flu of '92, she said. Daniel forgets that a hotel is not a spreadsheet. Anna kissed my forehead and stacked bowls. She told me to trust my read and to write things down. Dates, remarks, visitors. She has learned that paper outlives charm. I began a thin notebook and slid it beneath the ledger. Small entries, no drama. Daniel asked for access to accounting. Claire requested a spare set of keys. Claire left a glossy brochure on my pillow about senior living with heated pools. Daniel returned alone to measure the lobby when he thought I napped. The tape clicked like a quiet metronome. I did not confront them. I tightened small screws. I replaced 2 bulbs. I noted the shape of their plans and the tempo of their patience. They returned on Sundays with takeout. The cartons of salad looked generous. The conversations circled the same concern. Mom, the hotel could be so much more with vision. Mom, you deserve rest. Mom, what if you slip? What if help is not near? I nodded. I asked about their week. I sent them home with muffins for the road. When the door shut, I stood in the lobby and listened to the building answer back. A heater ticking, a door settling. The honest choir of a place that has nothing to sell but shelter. One afternoon, I found Daniel in the office doorway phone against his ear voice low. He was asking a lender about bridge financing and collateral options. He said boutique reposition. He said coastal asset with upside. He ended the call when he saw me and praised the view, then asked if I had considered a brand partnership for national reach. I told him we partner with the weather and the repetition of good service. It keeps us full enough. He smiled the way one humors a stubborn clock. Anna noticed the new tension in my shoulders. She brewed tea and rubbed the spot between my spine and right shoulder blade. She called it the ledger knot. She said, "Nora, you do not owe your child a deed as proof of love. You owe yourself breath." I laughed. I said we Whitman women breathe just fine. Still, when Claire texted late that night with a heart emoji and a link to an article on elder safety, I saved the message and wrote the date. By winter, Daniel proposed to Claire. The ring flashed under lobby lights like a tiny lighthouse that only warned others away. They spoke in plurals. Our restructuring, our plans, our hotel. I corrected them once. Then I stopped. I learned young that arguing with a tide wastes more strength than stepping back and watching where it wants to go. Besides, I had my notebook. I had the pearl at my throat. I had the quiet that lets truth take shape. It was 2 weeks before the wedding when Claire asked if we could have a family meeting at the hotel. Her tone was careful, almost rehearsed. I agreed, though my stomach tightened the way it used to before storm season. That Saturday afternoon, the lobby smelled of polish and sea air. I had just arranged fresh hydrangeas on the counter when headlights swept across the windows. They came as a group: Claire in her crisp white coat, Daniel at her side, and behind them his parents, Raymond and Judith Dawson. They walked up the steps as though they already owned the place, as though this weathered hotel was an acquisition to be inspected. I stood at the doorway, framed in the threshold, watching them approach. It struck me like a painting I didn't ask to see me inside them, outside 4 figures, aligned like appraisers about to name a price. Claire began with a smile that did not touch her eyes. "Mom, we've been thinking a lot about your future." She gestured for everyone to come inside. They sat on the lounge chairs as if they were in a boardroom, not my home. Raymond adjusted his tie. Judith crossed her legs and gave the place a glance that managed to be both pitying and appraising. Daniel cleared his throat. "This hotel has been good to you, Nora, but it's a lot for one woman to manage at your age. We worry about you. What if there's an accident, stairs, boilers, late-night guests? It's not safe." Judith chimed in smoothly. "Exactly. We've researched a beautiful senior residence not far from here. 24-hour care, social activities, prepared meals. You'd be surrounded by people your age. No more burdens." I stood by the door, fingers grazing the wood of the frame, grounding myself. The threshold between us felt heavier than oak. I wanted to shout, but silence held more weight. Claire leaned forward, her voice dripping with sweetness. "Mom, it's not just about safety. We've been struggling to find the right home to begin our marriage. Daniel and I thought since the hotel is so big and it's worth so much, it would make sense if we transitioned you somewhere more comfortable. The deed could go to us, and you'd never have to worry again." The words stung, not for their logic, but for the practiced performance behind them. I looked at my daughter, remembering nights she had fallen asleep against Robert's chest in this very lobby. I thought of the birthdays we celebrated here, the holidays spent with staff and family gathered like kin. She no longer saw memory, only equity. Raymond unfolded a folder from his briefcase. "We've run the numbers," he said, sliding papers across the coffee table. "With the sale of this property, you'd have more than enough to cover the residence for decades, and there would be surplus for Claire and Daniel to start fresh. Everyone wins. Everyone except me," I thought. Judith added, "You've done your part, Nora. It's time to let the younger generation take over. You'll thank us when you're safe, cared for, and free from responsibility." For a moment, I simply listened. The hum of the old chandelier filled the silence. My heart ached, but clarity spread through me like a tide. This was no spontaneous concern. This was a coordinated ambush. They had rehearsed each line, each appeal to guilt, each false note of compassion. They were not family. At that moment, they were petitioners circling a prize. I rested my hand against the door frame. In that stillness, I realized something. They thought I was fragile, worn, unable to resist. They mistook kindness for weakness. They had forgotten that Robert and I built this hotel with our bare hands and quiet strategy, that every choice I made to live modestly was deliberate. Claire mistook my silence for hesitation. She reached for my hand. "Please, Mom, don't make this harder than it has to be. Think about what's best for all of us." Her touch felt foreign, like a customer pressing for a refund. I withdrew gently, lifted my chin, and said nothing. My silence unsettled them. Daniel shifted in his seat. Judith pursed her lips. Only Raymond seemed unfazed, flipping his folder shut with a snap. After a long pause, I said, "Thank you for coming. I'll think about what you've said." My voice was calm, steady, the way you speak to guests. "You plan never to invite back." They left with polite farewells, but I caught the flicker of frustration in Claire's eyes. At the threshold, I stood again in the doorway, watching them descend the steps like officials leaving an inspection. The image etched itself into me within them without. When the door closed, I locked it, slid the bolt, and leaned against the wood. My chest burned, but not from fear, from resolve. They wanted to push me out, but they had misread me entirely. I walked to the office, pulled open the bottom drawer, and reached for my phone. My fingers dialed without hesitation. "Michael," I said when my lawyer answered, "It's Nora. I need you to prepare everything we discussed. Titles, transfers, protections. Keep them ready." He hesitated. "Mrs. Whitman, are you certain?" "Once we act, there is no turning back." I looked at Robert's photograph on the desk, his smile steady, his eyes unshaken. "I am certain," I said. "Not yet, but soon. Just be ready in case it becomes necessary." When I hung up, I unclasped what remained of my necklace and laid it gently beside Robert's photo. The pearl glimmered under the desk lamp like a lighthouse on a stormy coast. My daughter had turned love into leverage, but she had forgotten what Robert once told me: real money is quiet, and quiet money carries the sharpest power. That night, I wrote another line in my notebook: family meeting Dawson parents present. Proposal sell hotel, move me to residence. I said nothing, but I saw everything. The ballroom smelled of roses and champagne. Crystal chandeliers glowed against the gold wallpaper, and the band had just finished a lively number when Claire cleared her throat into the microphone. 150 guests turned toward her. The bride, radiant in lace and satin, held the glass like a queen about to announce a decree. I sat near the back, hands folded in my lap, watching my only daughter shine. Her voice rang clear. "Tonight I want to thank everyone who has supported us, especially my mother. Without her, none of this would be possible." Heads turned toward me, and I felt the weight of all those eyes. A warm flush rose in my chest, foolish hope for a moment of tenderness. Then she said it. "There is one more gift I need from you, Mom. The deed to the Whitman Hotel. $6 million of legacy that should rightfully belong to the next generation. To us." Gasps scattered like dropped glassware. My breath caught. I searched her face for some hint of jest, but her eyes were sharp, triumphant. Daniel stood behind her, one hand resting on her chair, his smile thin, satisfied. The silence that followed felt colder than the air conditioning. Forks froze mid-air. The violinist lowered his bow. I placed my palm over my necklace, the single pearl Robert had given me on our wedding day, a token of love that had outlived him. "I can't give you that," I said quietly, though the microphone wasn't near me. My words were barely audible, but Claire heard. She stepped down from the stage, crossing the dance floor in her gown that shimmered like frost. She leaned close enough that I could smell the wine on her breath. "You will," she hissed low but dangerous. "You owe it to us. You're too old to keep playing landlady." I shook my head slowly, my fingers still curled around the pearl. "No." Her hand shot out. In one swift motion, she ripped the necklace from my throat. The snap of the chain echoed louder than the band had played all night. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The pearl tumbled across the floor, rolling until it stopped beneath a table leg. For an instant, everything froze. My chest burned, not just from the sting at my neck, but from the deeper wound of betrayal. The music had stopped, the chatter dissolved, and all I could hear was the pounding of my own heart. Daniel smirked behind her, nodding slightly, as if this spectacle had been rehearsed. I bent down slowly, knees stiff, and picked up the broken chain from the marble floor. My hands didn't shake. I slipped the necklace into my purse, stood, and faced my daughter. Her smile faltered when she saw I wasn't weeping, wasn't pleading. I simply looked at her the way one looks at a stranger who has trespassed too far. I turned without a word. The crowd parted, guests shifting in uneasy silence. I walked through them, each step deliberate, each heel striking the marble like a gavel. At the doorway, I glanced once at the chandelier's glow on the pearl fragments in my palm. Then I left. The night air hit me with salt and cold. Out in the parking lot, the music faintly resumed inside, forced and hollow. I walked to my old sedan, opened the worn leather purse I'd carried for 10 years, and sat behind the wheel. The broken necklace lay across my lap like evidence. I breathed deeply. No tears, no, just a clean, burning clarity. This was the moment Robert had warned me about when he said real money stays quiet. Quiet money protects. Claire had mistaken silence for emptiness. Tonight, she would learn what silence can hold. I pulled out my phone, the plastic casing scratched and faded, and dialed the number I knew by heart. Michael answered on the second ring. His voice, steady, familiar, brought me the first sense of anchor I'd felt all evening. "Nora, are you all right?" "I'm fine." I said, my voice even. "It's time. Bring everything. Titles, accounts, all the protections we discussed. Bring them to the Royal Oaks Ballroom. Now." He paused. "Are you sure? Never been surer," I replied, clutching the broken necklace in my palm until the pearl pressed into my skin. "Minutes from now, the doors will open, and they will finally understand." I ended the call and leaned back, eyes closed, listening to the muffled cheer inside. The hotel I built with Robert's sweat and my years of keeping it alive was more than brick and deed. It was dignity. And I was not about to surrender it to the daughter who had turned love into spectacle. I placed the necklace gently into the glove box. The pearl glimmered under the dome light like a lighthouse, promising I wasn't lost. My hand steadied on the wheel. The tide had shifted. The storm had begun. I sat in my old Buick engine, off headlights dimmed, parked at the far edge of the Royal Oaks lot. The ballroom glowed across the pavement, a jewel box, lit with gold music, faintly leaking through its windows. My dashboard clock ticked louder than it ever had before. 30 minutes until Michael arrived. 30 minutes until the facade crumbled. I whispered the numbers like a litany. 30, 25, 20. The countdown wasn't just about time. It was about a lifetime of compromises, of bending so far for Claire that I had nearly broken. The leather seat creaked as I shifted, reaching into my purse for the envelope I always carried. Receipts transfers, the quiet paper trail of a mother who thought she was saving her daughter. I unfolded one $3,000 sent to cover a credit card balance Claire had hidden from me. I remembered her voice trembling on the phone that night 2 years ago. "Mom, it's just this once. I promise." Another slip showed a wire to Daniel's bank account labeled consulting fee. A lie I told myself when he asked for $5,000 to keep a business deal alive. That deal collapsed within months. I had told no one, not even Anna, my sister. For years I had believed what Robert used to say, caring is measured in what you quietly shoulder. But as I sat there with the papers glowing under the dome light, I felt the question rise sharp and merciless. Had I been saving Claire? Or ruining her 20 minutes? I thought of the months I covered her rent when she decided her job was beneath her. The tuition for that certificate course she abandoned halfway through. The shopping sprees dressed up as networking investments. Each time I convinced myself better me than a loan shark, better me than foreclosure, better me than shame. But the truth pressed harder. Each dollar I sent had been a brick in the palace of entitlement she now lived in. Tonight's humiliation, the demand for my hotel, the ripping of Robert's pearl from my neck was not sudden. It was the harvest of seeds I had planted myself. The clock flicked to 15. My hand trembled and I steadied it against the wheel. Thematic echoes circled in my mind like waves against a seawall. Save your child. That had been my guiding principle since the day Claire was born. But was I saving her, or feeding a fire that would burn us both? I thought of Robert again, standing with me in the hotel lobby decades ago, saying, "Money is quiet, Nora. Too much noise and you lose control." I had misunderstood him. I had made my money quiet in the wrong way, by bleeding it out in silence, by hiding my sacrifices, by teaching Claire that problems vanished if you dialed my number. 10 minutes now. Guests were laughing faintly inside, unaware of the storm walking toward them. I breathed in the smell of old leather and faint salt from the sea. I pulled the broken necklace from the glove box, the pearl gleaming under the soft dome light. Robert's gift. My anchor. I closed my fist around it. "No more," I whispered. My voice sounded firmer than it had in years. Saving Claire hadn't saved her at all. It had stripped her of responsibility, her spine, her gratitude. Tonight, the lesson had to come not in words or handouts, but in consequence. 5 minutes. My phone buzzed once Michael's text. On my way. 10 minutes. Relief washed over me, tempered with dread. Because once I handed him the signal, there would be no turning back. Claire would meet the truth, not the mother she thought she could outmaneuver. I looked one last time at the glowing ballroom, at the silhouettes of dancers, at the daughter I had both loved and failed in my own way. My heart ached, but resolve filled the spaces grief had carved. 10 minutes to go. Then silence would finally speak louder than money ever had. The ocean wind tugged at the hem of my dress as the ballroom doors sighed shut behind me. I sat in my old Buick at the far edge of the lot, the engine quiet, the dashboard clock marching forward. 10 minutes had ticked off my 30-minute promise. Headlights swung across the asphalt and slid past. Then a smaller set slowed, blinked twice, and parked beside me. Anna stepped out, hugging her cardigan tight, the same navy one she wore to late shifts. My sister always arrived when the air turned sharp. She tapped the window. I unlocked the door. Anna slid into the passenger seat and stared at my throat. "You're bleeding a little," she said, voice low, clinical, and tender at once. A nurse's reflex. She dabbed the spot with a tissue pulled from her pocket. Her eyes lifted toward the ballroom's lit windows where silhouettes kept dancing as if music could fix what broke. "Nora," she whispered. "I heard her. People are already talking." She swallowed hard. "She's your daughter." I let the words sit between us, heavy as wet rope. Across the lot, laughter rose high and brittle. I reached into the glove box and placed the broken necklace in my palm. The pearl winked back like a stubborn star. "Yes," I said, steady. "She is." The wind rattled the antenna. Anna watched my face for cracks. She has always been the one to hold my hand in hospital corridors and write down what doctors forget to translate. Tonight she waited for me to say what could not be unsaid. "She worries about losing face," I said finally. "I worry about losing myself." The sentence surprised me with its clean edge. Anna closed her eyes, nodding like a witness. "That's the line," she breathed. "That's the truth." She looked toward the ballroom again. "They will spin a story in there. You know that, right?" I nodded. Claire had always been fluent in performance. I had taught her stagecraft by keeping the lights on. For a moment, the car filled with the small sounds that stitch a life together, fabric shifting, the faint click of the clock, our breaths finding the same pace. A picture rose up, uninvited Claire at 6, asleep under the front desk, a crayon held like a flag. Robert carrying her out to watch the lobster boats. I felt my chest tighten. "I keep replaying that girl," I said. "The one who asked me if seagulls ever get weekends off." Anna smiled, soft and sad. "She lived here once," I said. "I do not know where she went." Anna reached for my hand. "Sometimes the kindest thing is to stop making it easy," she said. The nurse gave way to the sister. "Let me be practical. You need documentation. Photos of your neck time-stamped. Keep every message. You taught me that paper remembers longer than people." Her eyes flicked to the envelope in my lap. "Do you have the transfers?" I lifted the flap. Receipts breathed like old leaves. "Years of them," I said. "Too many." Anna nodded. "Good. Bring them to Michael." Guilt prowled the edges of the car, restless. "What kind of mother cuts her child off during her wedding?" I asked. Anna did not flinch. "The kind who has loved her child so completely that she forgot love has boundaries. The kind who learned tonight that survival requires a line." She squeezed my fingers. "And the kind who still leaves the door open, a crack, just not the safe wide." The wind eased as if it too were listening. "I called Michael," I said. "He is bringing everything. I'm ending the transfers, the guarantees, the quiet rescues, all of it." Saying it aloud grounded me like setting both feet on a dock after a long ride in rough water. Anna sank back, letting the idea wash through her. "All right," she said. "Then we decide what I do." Her eyes sharpened with a plan's calm. "I can stand by the main doors. If Claire storms out, I will keep space. If anyone tries to corner you, I will step in first. I will be your witness." "Retrieve my notebook," I added. "Bottom drawer of the desk." The thin one. Anna nodded and slipped out into the wind. I watched her jog along the shadow line of the building, small and sure as she has been my whole life. When she returned, she held the blue spiral like a fragile bird. I opened it and ran a thumb along the dates. Each entry a small refusal to forget. She smiled. "Ledger not any better?" she asked, rubbing the tense spot beneath my shoulder blade. It eased under her hand. "I am afraid I said the way you admit the weather." Anna breathed with me. "Fear is not a verdict," she said. "It's a sign you're standing on your own feet." Her gaze went to the pearl again. "Robert would be proud," she added. I felt that familiar ache, the clean one that does not rot you. It reminds you that love can be both memory and fuel. Headlights turned into the lot and paused, scanning each row. My phone buzzed once. "Michael here." Anna opened the door, the wind lifting her hair. "Remember your line," she said, bracing the frame. I repeated it, tasting its iron. She worries about losing face. I worry about losing myself. The power in it did not shout. It settled, the kind that does not need witnesses to be real. Anna nodded, fierce and gentle. "Good," she said. "Then let's be the quiet that moves mountains." She slipped her arm through mine, and together we stepped out to meet the lights. Michael's headlights swept across the lot like a lighthouse beam, steady and sure until they landed on my Buick. I exhaled, bracing myself. He parked beside me, and the familiar squeak of his door carried more comfort than I expected. My lawyer, my old friend, the one man who had seen me at both my weakest and my strongest, stepped out holding a leather briefcase that looked heavier than its size suggested. He tapped on the window, and when I lowered it, he leaned down. "Mrs. Hughes," he said softly, then corrected himself with a small smile. "Nora, are you ready?" I opened the door and stepped into the cool night. Anna stood just behind me, her arms folded against the chill. Michael straightened his tie, though he didn't need to. His presence always carried the scent of order ink paper procedure. He lifted the briefcase, setting it gently on the Buick's hood. The ballroom behind us throbbed with muffled music, but here in the shadows, the world belonged to the three of us. I prepared everything he said, opening the case with a neat click. Inside folders lay stacked like bricks in a wall. He pulled the first one free and laid it flat. "Notice of cancellation for your daughter's lease guarantee. Effective immediately." His voice was calm, professional, but I could hear a thread of regret beneath it. I held the pen he offered my hand, trembling. For years, my signature had been her lifeline, the invisible ink underwriting Claire's comfort. Tonight, it would become her undoing. I signed my name, slowly, the N curling with finality. When I lifted the pen, I felt a strange lightness in my chest. The second folder appeared. "Automatic transfers," Michael explained. "All the monthly deposits you've been making into their accounts, rent, credit cards, discretionary payments. We'll stop them at the bank tonight. The standing orders will be erased." I stared at the numbers printed neatly in rows. 4,000 here, 500 there. A rhythm of rescue that had played too long. My eyes blurred. "It looks so clinical on paper," I murmured, as if kindness could be reduced to digits. Michael met my gaze. "Kindness is never wrong, Nora, but boundaries protect kindness from becoming fuel for greed." I signed again, my hand steadier now. Each stroke of the pen felt like sewing a seam closed. The third folder was heavier. Michael tapped the header, "Revocation of Event Guarantee." He looked toward the glowing ballroom. "This covers tonight's expenses. Without your backing, the bill becomes theirs. It will hit them before the cake is even cut." Anna made a small sound in her throat, something between pity and satisfaction. I swallowed hard. The thought of guests stranded of whispers spreading it wasn't revenge I wanted. It was clarity. Still, I signed. Michael carefully stacked the completed documents, sliding each into a fresh envelope. "We'll courier these tonight," he said. "By morning, their world will look different." The papers rustled crisp against the Buick's metal. In that sound, I heard something I hadn't felt in years' power. Not the cruel kind that flaunts itself, but the quiet power of truth documented, stamped, notarized. Paper doesn't forget. Paper doesn't bend to tantrums. Paper, I realized, was justice. I pressed my palm flat against the final folder. Robert used to say money talks loud when it wants attention. But real money, I whispered, does its work in silence. Michael nodded, his expression softening. Robert was a wise man, and you've honored him tonight. I opened my purse and pulled out the broken necklace. The pearl gleamed faintly in the parking lot, light-cracked clasp catching the beam. "She tore this from me," I said, as if it were nothing. Michael studied it for a moment. "It will make a good exhibit," he said gently. "But more than that, it's your reminder. What they tried to strip from you wasn't jewelry. It was dignity." I held the pearl tighter. My hand still shook, but my eyes no longer wavered. Each signature, each page, each careful step was stitching my dignity back together. When the last document was signed, Michael closed the briefcase with a sharp click. The sound rang final, like the strike of a gavel. He looked at me not as a client, but as a woman who had just crossed a threshold. "From here on, Nora, everything changes. They may rage, they may plead, but the law will stand between you and their hands." I nodded. For the first time in years, I felt the truth of that. Not fear, not shame, just a clean, unyielding line. Behind us, the ballroom doors opened briefly, spilling music and laughter into the night. Then they shut again, muffling the world of illusion. Anna touched my arm. Michael placed the briefcase back into his car, and I stood with the pearl in my hand, knowing the tide had finally turned. My hand trembled still, but my eyes shone clear. Michael walked half a step ahead of me as we crossed the parking lot, his briefcase clutched like a weapon. Anna lingered behind, torn but resolute. The night air was cool, the ballroom glowing like a lantern filled with false warmth. My heels tapped slow and steady against the pavement. Every step was deliberate, every breath measured. The doorman glanced up, startled as we approached. He opened the door without a word. Music rushed out, bright and hollow, colliding with the silence I carried in my chest. Inside the ballroom pulsed with chatter and clinking glasses. A photographer snapped pictures near the cake, while Claire twirled in her gown at the center, radiant under chandeliers. For a moment, no one noticed me. Then whispers rippled, heads turned, and a hush spread like a dropped curtain. Claire's eyes locked on mine. They widened, then hardened. "You came back," she hissed, her voice sharp enough to pierce the hush. "Haven't you embarrassed me enough for one night?" Daniel hovered at her shoulder, pale but silent. His parents shifted uneasily at their table as though sensing the storm to come. Guests leaned forward, phones already rising, discreetly hungry for spectacle. Michael cleared his throat, his voice even. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for interrupting this celebration. But there are urgent matters that must be addressed involving financial guarantees attached to this event and to the couple you see before you." Gasps fluttered through the room. Claire laughed too loudly, brittle. "This is ridiculous. He's my mother's lawyer, always meddling." "Ignore him." Michael set his briefcase on the nearest table and opened it with a precise click. He withdrew a sheaf of papers and held them high. Effective immediately, he said, his tone carrying the weight of law. Mrs. Hughes has rescinded all financial guarantees connected to her daughter Claire Dawson and Mr. Daniel Grant. The words landed like thunder. The DJ cut the music without being asked. Silence pressed in, broken only by the whir of cameras as guests recorded every second. Claire's laughter cracked into shrieks. "What are you talking about? She can't just, she promised. She's my mother." I stepped forward, my voice quiet but clear. "I am your mother, Claire, not your bank." The room trembled with murmurs. My words hung heavier than any shout could have. Claire blinked at me, stunned, as if she hadn't recognized me until that moment. Michael unfolded the first document, reading aloud. "Lease guarantee revoked. The apartment you occupy under your mother's credit is now subject to termination within 30 days unless you secure your own guarantor." Daniel staggered back a step, his hand tightening at his collar. The color drained from his face. Guests whispered, some with sympathy, others with satisfaction. Claire lunged forward, clutching at the paper. "No, you can't." Michael smoothly pulled it away. "Additionally, all monthly transfers provided to you totaling $48,000 over the last 3 years are hereby terminated, effective tonight." A gasp swept the crowd like wind through dry leaves. Phones caught the numbers, the astonishment, the cracks forming in Claire's perfect world. I held her gaze. My voice trembled only slightly. "I gave and gave, hoping you'd see love in it. But all you saw was leverage." Claire's hands shook. "You don't understand. We needed it. Daniel's business, your greed," I said quietly, "is not my burden." Michael laid the final document on the table. The guarantee for this very evening, covering $53,000 in event expenses, has also been rescinded. The venue management will require immediate payment from the Dawsons or the Grants to continue hosting this reception. The effect was instant. Guests shifted, some edging toward the doors. A waiter froze mid-pour, glancing toward the manager at the back. The air thickened with dread. Claire's scream cut through it. "You're ruining my wedding." Her voice broke shrill, carrying both fury and fear. "In front of everyone, how could you?" I didn't raise my voice. I didn't move closer. I simply stood, pearl necklace clutched in my palm, and said, "You ruined it yourself when you tore this from me. You thought you were taking jewelry. What you ripped was the last thread of respect." Her knees buckled, and Daniel grabbed her arm. She collapsed into a chair, sobbing, mascara streaking her cheeks. Guests whispered louder now, their faces lit by phone screens. Some looked at me with pity, others with admiration. The story was already escaping this room, bleeding into the world beyond. I turned to Michael. "That's enough." He nodded, gathering the papers back into the case. The ballroom manager stepped forward, his expression tight. The murmurs swelled. Claire covered her face. Daniel's jaw clenched, his future unraveling in real time. I took one step closer, only so my words would be caught clearly on every recording device. "I am your mother, Claire. But a mother is not a bank, not a deed, not a vault. A mother is flesh and spirit, and you chose to forget that." Silence followed. No rebuttal, no justification. Just the sound of my heels as I turned away. Behind me, the ballroom erupted into chaos, cries, protests, questions, but I didn't look back. I walked out with Michael at my side, Anna close behind the broken necklace, still burning cold in my palm. For the first time that night, I felt taller than the chandeliers. 3 days passed, and the echoes of that night had already shifted into consequences. I didn't have to chase news. It arrived at my doorstep in whispers, in forwarded messages, in the hollow silence of a phone that wouldn't stop buzzing. Claire and Daniel had been evicted from their apartment that morning. The landlord wasted no time after Michael's notice. Their belongings, expensive but unpaid for, had been carried down to the sidewalk in cardboard boxes. A neighbor sent me a photo. Claire in her wedding dress, crumpled and streaked with dirt, arguing with the super as Daniel tried to wave off the cameras pointed at them. The unpaid wedding bills surfaced next. $53,000 owed to the ballroom, $22,000 to the florist, $10,000 to the band. Numbers that had once been invisible, hidden under my silent guarantees, now stared them down in black ink. I imagined them unfolding each invoice, the red past due stamp bleeding across the paper like a wound. My phone told the rest of the story. The first texts came angry. "You humiliated us. You'll regret this." Then came the bargaining. "If you just reinstate the transfers, we can fix this before it gets worse." By the second day, Claire's tone shifted to pleading. "Please, Mom, it was a mistake. I didn't mean to grab your necklace. I was upset. We can move past this." The next morning, threats returned. "Daniel says he'll sue you. He'll make you legally incompetent. Everyone saw how emotional you were that night." Each message lit up my screen, but I didn't respond. My silence was not cruelty. It was boundary. For the first time in years, I didn't rush to cushion their fall. I let gravity do its work. In the evenings when the noise of their desperation weighed too heavily, I found myself holding the broken necklace. The clasp was bent, one pearl scratched from scraping the ballroom floor. It looked fragile, almost useless. Yet I couldn't bring myself to hide it away. Instead, I carried it to a small jeweler tucked between a bakery and a dry cleaner. The man behind the counter, gray-haired and gentle, studied the damage. "This can be mended," he said softly, "but it will leave a line here, a faint scar." I nodded. "That's fine. I don't need it perfect. Just whole again." When I returned 2 days later, the necklace rested in a velvet box. The pearls gleamed as they always had, but the clasp bore a thin solder mark, delicate yet visible if you looked closely. I ran my thumb over it, feeling the seam a quiet testament. I wore it that evening while watering the plants on my balcony. The scar did not diminish the necklace, it deepened it. It was no longer just a symbol of my wedding day, of Robert's steady hands fastening it around my neck. It was also a reminder that broken things could be restored, not erased, but carried with honesty. As the sun set, painting the sky in bruised purples and fading gold, my phone buzzed again. "Claire, please, just answer me. We're sleeping at Daniel's parents'. They don't want us here. I don't know what to do. You're my mother." I set the phone down on the railing, the screen glowing, unanswered. I looked at the necklace's small scar and let the silence fill me, not as emptiness, but as peace. For years, I had equated love with rescue, thinking every fall my daughter made was my duty to soften. Now I understood sometimes love means stepping back. Sometimes silence is the only language dignity speaks. That night, I placed the necklace carefully in its box, not hidden, not displayed, just waiting like me for whatever came next. The envelope arrived on a gray Tuesday morning, slid under my apartment door with a heavy thud. At first, I thought it was another wedding bill redirected my way. But when I bent down and saw the court seal in the corner, my stomach sank and steadied at the same time. I knew before I opened it. Claire had filed a petition. She was asking the court to declare me legally incapacitated, incapable of managing my own affairs. I unfolded the papers slowly, each page smelling of toner and fresh ink. The language was cold clinical. Respondent Nora Whitmore, 74 years of age widow, subject to erratic emotional behavior and irrational financial decisions. She and Daniel had signed affidavits backed by statements from a handful of wedding guests who claimed I had caused a scene in the ballroom. The words on the page tried to reduce my life, my choices, my dignity into a caricature, a senile old woman lashing out. I sat at the kitchen table, the morning light pooling across the wood. For a long moment, I simply breathed. My first instinct should have been panic. Instead, calm spread through me like warm tea. I whispered it aloud, tasting the words, "Let them try." Michael arrived within the hour, as if he had been expecting this move. He set his leather briefcase on the table, opened it, and slid the petition beside his own stack of files. His silver hair caught the sunlight, his eyes sharp, but not unkind. "They're going for the nuclear option," he said evenly. "It's predictable. People like Claire and Daniel, when money dries up, they don't retreat. They escalate." I folded my hands. They think humiliation makes me incompetent. They don't understand it made me awake. Michael nodded. "And we have more than enough to show that." He pulled out a series of documents, bank transfers, receipts, the canceled auto-pay slips I had signed with him just nights ago. "This is a record of 3 years of consistent, rational financial management. No judge will look at these and believe you've lost your mind." He clicked open a small laptop. On the screen, he cued videos. The slap of the necklace, the confrontation in the ballroom, the gasps of 150 witnesses. These went viral, Nora. The public perception is in your favor. Strangers see courage, not instability. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. The memory of that necklace ripping from my neck still throbbed, but now it pulsed with a strange power. Proof, not shame. Michael continued. "I've already contacted Anna. She's willing to give sworn testimony. She saw Claire's disdain years ago. She heard their so-called concerns about assisted living. Her word will cut through the pretense." I nodded slowly. My sister had always been the mirror I didn't want to face, the one who named the ingratitude before I dared admit it. If she was ready to speak publicly, then truth had more voices than just mine. Michael spread one last folder across the table. "We'll call Joseph, too. He witnessed Daniel bringing an appraiser to your hotel without permission. And Amelia, the realtor, she uncovered their debt. Together, this builds a timeline of manipulation. A judge won't miss the pattern." I traced my finger along the edge of the court petition. They wanted me stripped of agency, placed under their guardianship, like a child. But the evidence said otherwise. I was not fragile. I was a woman who had simply been too generous too long. The thought almost made me smile. Claire believed she could paint me weak on paper, while my strength had always been in what I refused to say aloud. Now, finally, those unspoken truths would take shape in documents, testimonies, videos, motifs of justice. I closed the petition, stacked it neatly, and slid it back across to Michael. "File our response. Prepare everything. If they want to fight in court, we'll meet them there. No shouting, no dramatics. Just paper. Just truth." Michael studied me for a moment, then gave the faintest smile. "You know, Nora, most clients tremble at this stage. You look almost steady." I lifted my chin. "Because for the first time in years, Michael, I'm not playing their game. I'm playing mine." He gathered the files back into his briefcase, his movements precise. "Then let's make them see who you really are." When he left, The apartment fell quiet again. I glanced toward the velvet box on the sideboard. The necklace rested inside clasp, repaired the faint scar gleaming under the light. I touched it, feeling the line with my fingertip. A flaw that proved resilience. They thought that scar meant weakness. But I knew better. It meant survival. It meant strength stitched back together. And it was about to shine under the sharpest light of all a courtroom. The courthouse smelled of old wood polish and recycled air. I sat at the respondent's table, my hands folded neatly, my necklace resting cool against my skin. Claire sat across from me with Daniel at her side, both dressed in muted grays as if costuming themselves for virtue. Their lawyer, a man with slicked hair and a smile too wide, shuffled papers theatrically, as though truth lived only in his folders. When the judge entered, everyone rose. I kept my gaze steady, not on the bench, but on Claire, her lips pressed into a thin line when she caught my eyes. For a flicker of a second, I saw the little girl she once was sulking when told no. But then it vanished, replaced by the woman who had yanked the necklace from her mother's throat in front of 150 guests. Their lawyer began. "Your Honor, this case is about an elderly widow who has lost her ability to make rational decisions. My clients Claire Whitmore and her husband Daniel seek only to ensure her safety. They have observed increasingly erratic behavior, emotional outbursts, impulsive financial decisions, and irrational hostility toward her only daughter." He gestured toward me as if I were an exhibit. "This is not about greed. It is about love and protection." Claire dabbed at her eyes with a tissue she didn't need. Daniel kept his gaze fixed on the table, playing the role of dutiful husband, reluctantly dragged into family affairs. Then it was Michael's turn. He rose calmly, no theatrics, only that steady voice that always reminded me of Robert's. "Your Honor, we respect the seriousness of a competency petition. But the evidence here speaks otherwise. My client, Mrs. Nora Whitmore, is 74, yes, widowed, yes. But she is not incompetent, she is not irrational. She is deliberate, she is disciplined, and she is the very opposite of what these papers allege." He clicked a button, and the courtroom monitor lit up. The video from the ballroom played the moment Claire tore the necklace from my neck, the audible gasp of 150 guests, the silence that followed. The judge leaned forward. The tissue in Claire's hand froze halfway to her face. This, Michael said, is the so-called irrational outburst. A mother refusing to hand over the deed to her family hotel on her daughter's wedding night. And what was her daughter's response? Public assault. Humiliation. Does that strike this court as the action of a caregiver concerned for her mother's safety? Murmurs rippled through the gallery. Claire flushed crimson, her lawyer scrambling. Objection irrelevant. Overruled, the judge said, voice firm. "Continue, Mr. Jones." Michael laid out receipts one by one, bank transfers, tuition payments, credit card statements. For 3 years, Mrs. Whitmore has subsidized her daughter's life over $200,000 in quiet support. Rent car insurance, even wedding expenses. Rational, documented, consistent. Does this look like a woman incapable of managing her affairs? Or does it look like a mother being drained? The judge's brow furrowed. Claire's lawyer fidgeted. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. Then Michael opened the final folder. His voice lowered, deliberate. "And here, Your Honor, is the most telling piece." On the screen, an email appeared, projected for all to see. The subject line read, "Family Enforcement Fund." The sender, Daniel's father. The recipients, Daniel and Claire. Michael read aloud, "If Nora resists, we must establish a fund to cover legal costs for compelling her transfer." Claire continued pressing the assisted living angle. Judges respond well to safety arguments. The courtroom fell silent. Every word of the email landed like a hammer. Claire's eyes widened, darting to Daniel, whose face had drained of color. The judge's gavel tapped once. "Is this authentic?" the judge asked. "Yes, Your Honor," Michael replied. Subpoenaed from the Dawson family server, verified by a forensic technician. This was never about care. It was a coordinated financial strategy. The judge turned to Claire. "Do you deny sending or receiving this?" Claire opened her mouth, closed it, then whispered, I didn't mean answer yes or no." "Yes," she said, finally voice breaking. Daniel buried his face in his hands. The judge leaned back, exhaled. "This petition is denied. Not only do I find no evidence of incompetence, I see troubling evidence of attempted financial exploitation. I am referring this file to the District Attorney's Office for investigation into potential elder abuse and financial coercion." A gasp swept the courtroom. Claire's lawyer sputtered about misunderstandings about family disputes exaggerated in the heat of emotion. The judge silenced him with a single glance. I sat very still. I hadn't needed to raise my voice. I hadn't needed to beg. Justice had spoken through paper, through video, through the quiet accumulation of truth. As we stood to leave, Claire looked at me with eyes full of panic. "Mom, please," she mouthed. For the first time, I felt no compulsion to soften. I simply shook my head. Outside the courtroom, Michael placed a hand lightly on my shoulder. "It's over," he said. "No," I replied softly, watching sunlight spill across the marble floor. "It's only begun. Now they face the cost of what they tried to take." The courthouse steps were crowded with people spilling out into the late afternoon sun. Some lingered to whisper. Others hurried away, eager to shake the dust of family shame from their shoes. Claire stood off to the side, face streaked with mascara, clutching Daniel's sleeve like a child afraid of being left behind. He avoided her eyes, shifting his weight as though the marble beneath him burned. I walked past them without a word. Not triumphant, not vengeful, just steady. My shoes clicked against the stone, the sound louder than I expected, like punctuation in a sentence no one wanted to read aloud. For a moment, I thought Claire might call my name, but she didn't. She wept quietly into the tissue crushed in her palm, and Daniel turned his back to me. Inside my chest, there was no celebration, only a hollow space. This was my daughter, the baby I once carried against my heart. The girl I braided ribbons into for Sunday school. The young woman I had believed would carry Robert's steadiness forward. Now she was also the woman who had torn the necklace from my neck, the key vat of my marriage, the last piece of Robert's hands on mine. Both truths lived inside her. Both truths lived inside me. That night, the hotel was unusually quiet. Guests had checked and the lobby lamps glowed, but I barely noticed the rhythm of the place I had kept alive for decades. I sat at my old writing desk in the suite Robert and I once shared, the desk scarred with water rings and years of small ledgers. My necklace lay beside me, its chain repaired, but the tiny seam still visible like a scar that whispers instead of shouts. I pulled out a piece of stationery, the same cream paper we used for guest notes in the early years, and began to write. Not to the court, not to Michael, not to the world, to Claire. Claire, my daughter tonight. The courthouse was filled with truths you never wanted revealed. I saw you cry, and I saw Daniel look away. I did not feel joy in that moment, only sorrow. Sorrow that the story of us has reached such a place. I want you to know that I remember who you were before ambition hardened you. I remember your first ballet recital when you forgot your steps and looked for me in the crowd. I raised my hand and smiled, and you found your rhythm again. I remember the day Robert let you ring the hotel's brass bell at the front desk. You laughed so loud the whole lobby joined in. But I also cannot forget what you have done. You pulled the necklace Robert gave me on our wedding day, as though it were nothing but a chain to strip away. That gesture lives in me like a bruise under the skin tender even when unseen. You tell yourself it was about the hotel, about money. But it was more. It was about power, about believing you could reduce me to a signature on a deed. You wanted the foundation of my life not to honor it, but to consume it. I loved you, Claire. I still do, though differently now. Love does not mean surrender. Love does not mean blindness. I will not let your choices destroy what Robert and I built, or what dignity I have left. If you ever decide to come back, not for the hotel, not for the inheritance, but for me, I will be here. But only if you walk in with respect. Only if you see me not as an obstacle, not as a vault, but as your mother. I paused. The words blurred for a moment, tears pricking the corners of my eyes. Not the kind of tears that collapse you, but the kind that sting and cleanse. I signed the letter with my full name, Nora Whitmore. Then I folded it carefully and slid it into an envelope. I did not seal it. I did not address it. I placed it inside the top drawer beneath Robert's old hotel ledger. It was a letter never meant to travel through mail, only through time. A mirror for me, a possibility for her, a record for the silence between us. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. In the hum of the hotel's air vent, I imagined Robert's voice, calm and steady. Money speaks too loudly, Nora. But love whispers. Sometimes so quietly, you only hear it when the room is still. The room was still, and I listened. The week after court, the hotel no longer felt cavernous. It felt like a home again, not because Claire was gone, but because Anna arrived. My sister carried 2 suitcases and a grocery bag filled with her favorite teas. She set them down in the small apartment adjacent to mine once used for visiting staff. "If you don't mind," she said, though we both knew it wasn't a question. I minded nothing. For the first time in years, I didn't eat breakfast alone. Anna fussed over my coffee, always too weak for her taste, and insisted on scrambling the eggs herself. We argued in that gentle, familiar way that makes you smile even as you scold. When she caught me staring too long at the necklace scar, she just shook her head. "It's a mark of survival, Nora, not a wound." Michael stopped by often. Papers in his hand, concern in his eyes, but also respect. "You're stronger than most of my clients," he said one evening as we reviewed the last of the filings. "Most fold under family pressure. You stood." His words didn't make me proud, they made me tired. Yet tiredness carried a sweetness too, the kind that comes after setting down a heavy load. The guests at the hotel noticed. I saw it in the way they lingered at the front desk, in the nods of recognition when they realized who I was. Not just a manager. Not just an old widow. A woman who had walked back into a ballroom with her dignity intact. One afternoon, as I was arranging fresh flowers in the lobby, a habit Robert began that I never abandoned, an elderly gentleman approached. He wore a navy blazer, polished shoes, the air of someone raised on discipline. I recognized him after a pause, Mr. Harris, a guest who had stayed with us nearly every summer for 30 years. His wife had passed 2 years earlier, but he still came faithful as the tide. He carried a single rose in his hand. Its petals were deep red, the kind that seems to hold more history than fragrance. He placed it gently on the counter between us. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said, voice husky with age but steady. I watch the news, and I've heard the whispers in town. You did what I never dared. I blinked. What do you mean? He looked at the rose before answering. My son bled me dry. Loans, guarantees, excuses. I never found the courage to say no. He's gone now, and so is most of what I had. You said no. In front of everyone. His throat caught, and he gave a small shake of his head. I wish I had done the same. I reached across the counter and touched the rose. The stem was cool, the thorns clipped. We all carry our stories, Mr. Harris, I said quietly. Sometimes the bravest thing isn't saying no. Sometimes it's surviving what came after. His eyes watered, but he smiled a small, grateful smile and pressed my hand once before stepping back. Even so, you reminded me that dignity can outlive regret. After he left, I tucked the rose into the vase with the others. Its red stood out against the whites and yellows, a quiet beacon. That evening, Anna poured us each a glass of wine in the apartment kitchen. The lamplight was soft, her laughter even softer. Look at us, she said, raising her glass. Two old women stubborn as mules still here. Still here, I echoed, clinking my glass against hers. In that moment, I realized something simple but profound. Blood had betrayed me, but love had not. Family is not only who you raise or who you marry into. Family is who stands beside you when the world grows heavy. I had lost a daughter, but I had gained a sister, a lawyer who respected me, a guest who saw me, and a hotel that still breathed with Robert's presence. That was my chosen family. And it was enough. The hotel doors have always been heavy. Oak-polished, fitted with brass handles that gleam no matter how many storms beat against them. Robert once said they were more than doors. They were a promise whoever walked through them was safe. Tonight, I stood just inside my hand, resting on the wood, feeling the grain beneath my palm. The hotel was no longer just a building. It had become a mirror of my own life, once threatened, once coveted, and now reclaimed as a symbol of my freedom. The lobby behind me was warm with lamplight. Anna hummed softly as she arranged flowers, her presence a quiet reassurance. Michael had just left after our final review of paperwork, everything secure, every boundary drawn. Yet I lingered at the threshold as though I needed to cross one more invisible line. Through the glass across the street, I saw her. Claire, my daughter. She stood with her arms folded, her dress wrinkled, her hair pulled back in haste. She looked smaller than I remembered. Not the triumphant bride from the ballroom, not the fiery young woman who once believed she could tear my life apart with a single gesture. Just a girl shivering in the dusk, staring at the hotel she thought would be hers. For a long moment our eyes met. She did not move closer, and I did not step out. The distance between us was heavier than the oak doors themselves. I could see hesitation in her face, the way her weight shifted from one foot to the other. She wanted to come inside. She wanted to speak. Yet she stayed where she was rooted to the pavement, as though the very air refused her passage. I opened the door halfway, the night breeze slipping in with a faint chill. The sound startled her. She took a step forward, then stopped. My hand tightened on the handle. This was the door motif of my life, always deciding who may come through and who must remain outside. Once I had failed to guard that threshold. I had let greed and disrespect cross over believing family ties excused anything. Never again. Claire. I said softly, though I knew she couldn't hear me across the street. My voice was more for me than for her. In my mind, I repeated the words I had spoken in the ballroom. I am your mother, not your bank. And I thought of the necklace once torn from me, now repaired. A scar remained in the chain, just as a scar remained in me. Stronger, visible, but healed. Claire lowered her eyes. For the first time, I saw shame flicker across her features. She turned slightly, as if debating whether to run or to stay. Then she chose the only thing she could manage. She stood still. The streetlight threw her shadow long across the pavement, but not long enough to reach the door. I released the handle and let the door ease shut, not slammed, not locked, just closed. A door half open carries its own meaning, an invitation one must earn, not presume. Behind me, Anna called my name, her voice steady and warm. I turned from the glass and stepped back into the lobby, the air scented with roses and lemon polish. I felt the weight lift from my chest. Claire had been at the threshold, but she had not crossed it. The choice was no longer mine. It was hers. 2 years can feel like a lifetime. Standing in the lobby of the Whitman Hotel, I could hear the same brass clock ticking on the wall, but the rhythm of my days had changed. The place no longer felt like a battleground. It was alive again, steady bookings, travelers sipping coffee by the fireplace, children dragging suitcases, bigger than themselves, across the marble floor. The hotel was stable. I was stable. I was 76 now, though people told me I carried myself like a woman 10 years younger. Maybe that was because I had stopped carrying the weight of silence. The battles with Claire, with Daniel, with the courtroom, those scars had settled into memory, not chains. That fall, I founded the Nora Whitman Foundation. Its purpose was simple: to protect older women from being coerced into selling their homes or assets. What began with one lawyer and a borrowed office had grown into a staffed program with volunteers, financial advisors, and counselors. The sign on our small downtown office carried my name, though I sometimes wished it didn't. I didn't create the foundation for recognition. I created it so no woman would stand alone the way I once had. Every week we received new cases. I remember one vividly: a 71-year-old widow named Mrs. Martinez, pressured by her son to sign over her duplex. He told her it was for her safety. She came into our office, shaking the same way my hands once shook, signing away transfers I thought were helping Claire. We helped her secure a legal trust, and she kept her home. She later wrote me a note that said, "You gave me back more than a roof. You gave me back my spine." Another case was Mrs. Green, 68, who discovered her daughter-in-law had been secretly forging her checks. When we presented the evidence in court, Mrs. Green wept as the judge ruled in her favor. "I thought nobody would believe me," she said. I put my arm around her shoulder and whispered the words I once whispered to myself. We are not invisible. One story still makes me smile. Mr. Harris, the retired teacher, who once handed me roses in the parking lot. He became one of our first donors. He told me his wife had been forced into selling her family's farm years ago under pressure from relatives, and he regretted not fighting harder. "You did what I couldn't," he said. "At least now someone else will be spared." His donation funded free consultations for 20 families that year. Sometimes late at night, I would sit in my office with a cup of tea and look at the photographs pinned to the bulletin board faces of men and women who had walked through our doors, frightened at first, then stronger, more upright. It reminded me that justice is rarely loud. Often it's paperwork. Often it's a quiet refusal to yield. The accountability montage of these years played in my mind like a film reel. A daughter forced by court to return her mother's deed. A nephew barred from accessing his aunt's accounts. A granddaughter apologizing publicly after spreading lies to declare her grandmother unfit. Each case different, but each a victory not just for one person, but for dignity itself. As for Claire, I hadn't seen her often. She came by once about a year ago, asking for another chance, tears streaking her face. I listened, but I didn't hand her the keys she still secretly longed for. The door is not locked, I told her, but you have to walk in with respect. She hasn't crossed that threshold yet. Sometimes when I touch the scarred chain of my necklace, I feel a small ache, not just for what was lost, but for what was learned. That necklace repaired, but never quite the same, rests against my skin as both warning and comfort. It reminds me that love without respect is only hunger. Looking around the hotel lobby, hearing the gentle murmur of guests, I felt something rare and precious peace. The kind that comes not from forgetting, but from using pain as seed for change. The Nora Whitman Foundation was no longer just mine. It belonged to every woman who ever feared losing her home, her voice, her worth. And as I locked the office that evening, I whispered the quiet truth that had carried me through these 2 years. It is never too late to reclaim yourself. 2 years teach you which silences are peaceful and which are dangers in disguise. Claire has not come back. She surfaced now and then as a voice through my phone, a plea with a deadline. The messages followed a familiar curve, anger, bargain, confession, demand. Mom, it's temporary. Just a bridge. Daniel is between projects. The reasons changed. The pattern did not. I kept the door ajar inside me and the wallet closed. When I answered at all, I said the same sentence, I won't fund your choices. If you want me, come without a price tag. Then I hung up and stood by the window until my breath returned. Saying no did not feel heroic. It felt like rehab for the heart. Sometimes guilt tried its old tricks, slipping in at night like a draft. The moral math never balanced cleanly. She is my child, the whisper said. Then the counterweight. She is also the woman who ripped Robert's necklace from my throat. Both truths lived inside me. I did not choose between them. I carried both and let them teach me patience without amnesia. Anna guarded the boundaries when my resolve thinned. If a late text left me shaky, she poured tea and read the letter I never mailed, the one tucked beneath Robert's ledger. This is your compass, she would say. Michael checked in after hearings for other women we helped, always ending with the same reminder. Mercy isn't money. Mercy is clarity. I repeated it like a psalm for the practical. Work filled the rooms that worry used to rent. The foundation grew. The hotel breathed. Guests returned. On quiet mornings, I polished the brass bell and thought of Claire at 6 coloring behind the desk, her feet barely touching the floor. Memory is not a contract. It proves a moment once existed. You don't hand over the house because the picture is sweet. Twice Claire called from numbers I didn't recognize. Twice I answered. She spoke fast. It's different now, Mom. I've learned. Just 5,000 to reset things. The second time she added, if you love me, you will. I let the silence stretch. I do love you, I said. Enough to stop paying for harm. She hung up hard. I placed the phone face down and traced the small solder mark on my necklace until my pulse settled. I still stand at the hotel doors some evenings, letting the ocean wind move the glass. Across the street, I sometimes imagine a figure hesitating in the dusk, unsure whether to cross. I keep the literal door closed at night. The symbolic one remains what it must be, half open. One day, if you knock like someone who knows respect, I will turn the handle. Not before. Forgiveness, people tell me, is a single act. For me, it is tidal. Some days it rises. Other days, it slides back, leaving rocks exposed. I pray to the boiler that keeps working, to the roses that keep blooming, to the ledger that still balances. I ask for a heart that stays soft without being taken. If you are listening, Claire, hear this. You were never a ledger line to me. You were a baby under warm towels in the laundry room, a girl ringing the lobby bell. I won't erase what you became to make a sunny ending, but the door is there. It is not locked. It waits for footsteps that come with empty hands and a different story to tell. Until then, I will keep the lights low and the keys where they belong with me safely. I brew mint tea the way Robert liked it. Leaves crushed gently between my fingers, kettle off the boil, steam rising like a soft prayer. The hotel is quiet the hour between check-ins and dinner. The brass clock on the wall ticks like a heartbeat I can trust. I carry the cup to the window and touch my necklace. The clasp is whole again, a small silver seam cool against my skin. A scar, yes, but also a promise that what breaks can be mended without pretending it was never broken. From here, I can see the ocean, winter blue and honest. Years ago, on this very stretch of coast, Robert slid his arm around my shoulders and said, "Real money is quiet." I did not understand then how that sentence would anchor me. Paperwork became my harbor. The deed locked away, the trust airtight, the affidavits lined like stones in a wall. Justice does not always arrive with sirens. Sometimes it wears a notary stamp and a calm voice. Anna moves in the kitchen, humming off key. Her presence is a lamp left on in the next room. Michael left an hour ago after reviewing another intake for the foundation. The folder sits on my desk with a pink sticky note that reads, "You are still the one in charge." Chosen family, not born by blood, but proven by staying. I have learned that love measured in quiet daily tasks is louder than any speech. I think of Claire as the tea cools. The door remains at its angle, not locked, not flung open. I am not selfish. I am just keeping the only thing I have left. My dignity, my name on the deed, the rhythm of a life I built with my own hands. If she ever returns with empty hands and a different heart, I will hear her knock. Until then, the threshold is mine to guard. On the bulletin board above my desk, the foundation's year is pinned in small victories. Mrs. Martinez kept her duplex. Mrs. Green recovered forged funds. A granddaughter apologized in court. Mr. Harris planted roses by his late wife's photo and sent a donation card scented faintly of soil. Accountability is not spectacle. It is a line in a ledger, a safe deposit key, a judge's signature that steadies a shaking hand. Quiet victory. Paperwork justice. Chosen family. I sip the last of the mint tea and open the balcony door. The air smells like salt and lemon polish from the lobby. Seagulls stitch slow arcs over the water. I touch the necklace again and feel the cool seam under my thumb. I used to resent that line. Now it guides me like a groove on a map. Robert's sentence returns not as law but as comfort. Real money is quiet. Real love is too. It holds, it does not grab. It repairs, it does not erase. I set the ledger on the shelf where Robert kept it. Beside it, the letter, "I never mailed," rests like a folded wing. Some doors open with keys, others with time. I have learned to hold the handle gently. Before we say goodbye, we would love to know where you are watching from. Is it a quiet morning with a warm cup of coffee, or a late night where stories like this keep you company? Let us know in the comments. We read everyone with gratitude. And if this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing to the channel. Not just to hear more stories like this, but to be part of a community that still believes in kindness, healing, and second chances. Thank you for spending your time with us today. Wherever you are, we hope you carry this story with you. And remember, sometimes the miracle does not knock on your door. It waits quietly until you are ready to open your heart. Take care, and we will see you in the next story. I set the empty cup in the sink and turn off the light in the office. The lobby lamps glow. The doors are shut. The ocean keeps its steady counsel. Enough, and this enough is mine.